So folks, we're just about to start another workshop on archaeological photography. As always, please have a pen and paper ready, take any questions that you might have and put them into the interactive sessions later. We'll answer them as best we can. Watch the videos back a few times if you need, or as many times as you need. This is going to be quite a brief session. It's actually quite hard to do archaeological photography online, okay? First thing I will say is this is not a session on how to take a good photograph in terms of exposure, shutter speed, etc., all right? On our sites, because they're student digs, we actually use quite automated cameras, always set to auto. So that's not the purpose of today. It's not what we're really going into. What we're trying to go into is composition, why we take archaeological photographs, what we use, how we stage them. That's really what we're going to talk about, okay? The amount of work that goes into taking a photograph is directly, I guess, relative to what the photograph is going to be used for. So if you like, there's 5 or 6, or maybe even less than that, different types of photographs from an archaeological site. There's ones we use for memory aid. So sometimes we just take a photograph to physically remember what happened on site. It could be a digger coming to backfill trenches or cuttings that you've opened. It could be there was a massive flood. You wanted to take a record shot, a memory aid of the site being flooded. So they're almost like snap photos. They're there just to capture some digital data, capture an image in a moment in time, but you can't really be seeing them being used for much else, okay? There's what we like to call reference shots, where you are going to be using the photograph for an illustrative point of view, that you do want to show something and that you do want to show some archaeology. There are photos that you ultimately think need to be of report quality. They're going to be put out in the public domain in reports, very much to give clear archaeological information to the viewer. And then there's photographs that you might even want to go into publication, okay? The amount of work that you do for each of those photographs is relative to how they're going to be used and what they're going to be used for. So for example, years ago, we used to spend days, sometimes even weeks, cleaning a whole site immaculately, getting it ready for a professional photographer to come in with effectively a giant selfie stick, a telescopic boom, to take post-X photographs of the site. And hundreds of man-hours of work could go in to just getting these few photographs, okay? When you're taking a photograph, assuming that it's an important shot, you want to make sure that it's as clear and everything is as clearly distinguished and as clearly presented as it should be. So just some basic rules of thumb that we'll run through, I should say. Firstly, you don't want anything in the shot that shouldn't be. So you want to remove any rubbish, coats, personal items, water bottles, excess tools, etc. You want the shot to be as clean as possible, which means it might need to be trailed back a second or third time even. It might need to be trailed multiple times. You want anything that is, I guess, debitage, maybe moved to the side, old rocks put out. If there's grid pegs, make sure they're nice, straight. Everything literally as presentable as it possibly can be. And this can be quite an investment of work at times. Sometimes you have to do quite a bit to get the site to that level of presentation, okay? When you have the site looking how you want it presented, obviously the photo will vary on what exactly you are taking. So we have a whole variety of different scales here. This is one nearly all archaeologists know, the IFRAC colour scale. So not only does it have a scale bar on top, but it has the various different colour codes. So you can see the different hues of soil conditions. And we have anything from little small scales to go with artifacts, or very small, very, very small features, right up to the meter ranging rods, okay? As I said, it's hard to simulate photography in a setting like this. So what we're going to do is we'll throw up a few slides as I talk of various different photograph types and what we're putting into them, okay? So you've cleaned up the whole area. You've cleaned back the archaeology. You have to make sure it's distinct, that it pings up, that the viewer can see it. Of course, you can bring the photograph into a post-processing program like Photoshop and maybe draw on lines or accentuate the edges, but it's much better if you have the archaeology, the soil differentiations, the different colors, etc., clear enough that the viewer can see this without the photograph being manipulated in any way, okay? Then you have to decide, what am I taking? What different scales do I want to use? And then finally you have to know what information to capture with the photograph itself. So I've got 2 different photograph boards here, but this is obviously the preferred one. So this is a number insert board used in archaeology for lots of other things like menus. But you'll see there's some basic information on this again. So the permit number, which you'll probably remember from previous excavations at this point, is the unique permit number for the excavation here in Ferrycarrig. The official name of the excavation is Newtown. You can see this was taken of a burial. This photograph is taken of a burial, so it's burial 2. And you'll remember from previous videos how we give out feature numbers, how we record features. So this particular feature number is feature 202, which was probably the cut for the burial, because presumably the fill would have been 201. It was a mid-excavation shot, and you have the date and the initials. So all this is captured, put in with the burial, and always with a north arrow. Okay, so again, there's different varieties, there's different sizes of north arrows, so it really is down to what size of feature or artifact you're taking, and indeed personal preference. So I've just taken 4/8 to give an indication. It's even down to the very smallest little north arrows that you can insert on the number board itself. This board takes a little bit of time, and especially if you're working in commercial archaeology, time can be at an absolute premium on occasion, but it does look 100 times better in a report or a publication. An alternative is simply a chalkboard. Okay, you can see it doesn't look as well, but if you're just trying to capture the information quickly, this can also work quite well. So you can see most of the same information listed along here. One difference you will see, this board actually came back with me from Australia. It's talking about excavation unit instead of feature number. Okay, but we talked about the difference between excavation units and feature numbers in a previous video, so please look at that. Okay, this information, like most information in archaeology, also needs to be replicated, or some of it replicated in a digital photo register, which this is some of our archive from Newtown. So generally what we would do is we would have a single one of these sheets on a clipboard that goes into our photographic bag out on site. And when it's full, we take it off the clipboard and we put it straight into an archive, so that if it gets wet or something goes missing, we've lost one sheet rather than a whole pile of sheets. So don't leave information, it's just good housekeeping. Don't leave sheets and sheets of information accumulate on clipboards when they don't need to be. Try and get them archived away as quickly as possible. And on this sheet, you'll see some very, very simple fields, but we'll still run through them very quickly. So there is the image number. That is the unique image that the camera gives to every photograph it takes. I have been on sites where they, I suppose, just trying to be very thorough, renumbered the photographs from 1 up sequentially. So they may have put the site code in, 17EO318, then 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, etc. That number that they renumber them on isn't in the metadata of the image. So it's much better to just maintain the number that the camera gives the photograph. Then it asks for the feature number or the artifact number, because again, you could be taking photographs of features, you could be taking them of artifacts. If it's neither of those, feel free to write in a more accurate description, like cutting to or site general or whatever it might be. And then description, include the excavation stage. Is it pre-excavation, post-excavation, mid-excavation? What's the image type? Okay, and what direction are you facing? So that's the direction you are looking while you're holding the camera. So I am facing north, south, east or west. And again, that's a fault safe with your north arrow, because obviously both of those things should be telling the same story. If you're saying you're looking south and the north arrow is pointing towards you, that's obviously right. And then date and initials, okay? What this obviously develops to in time is a log of every single digital photo taken on the site. You throw this into a database system, whatever you're using, Excel, Access, something else, and you want to get the photos up for feature number 3004, you put it into your database and instantly you get all the photographs back. So really what we're discussing here is the paper trail and some of the information used. Typically, just to give an example of a feature, because we don't have time to run through lots of them, if I was excavating a burial, for instance, I would have these 2 ranging rods, possibly set up at right angles. As I said, demonstrations will come up on the screen anyway, around the burial, with the board in, and with a north arrow in, okay? So a north arrow of approximately this sort of size. The board I would leave in for 1 or 2 shots, and then I would take it out for the rest. So you'll have the board in to make sure the photographs are fully identified in case anything goes wrong with your log. Excuse me. In case anything goes wrong with your log, but you don't necessarily want to leave them in for every single photograph. And then I would take up much closer photos with much smaller scales, something like these, or right-angled versions of them, of areas like the sacrum, the skull, the hands, the feet, and especially any grave goods, if any grave goods or artifacts were included in the burial, anything of note, basically. So again, I'll put up an image of a beautiful burial we excavated in Rathmalion in County Meath, where we found grave goods, which we interpret as a smoker's pouch. It's going to be on some of the reading lists that you'll be looking at, and we took very, I suppose, close-up detailed photographs of those. The photography does take a bit of time, staging it, so do, I guess, give it the attention it deserves, because while it's a very different record to the plans that we'll discuss in another video, it is still an equally important record. It still gives a good visual representation of what was preserved on site before you excavate it. So there's sort of the basics, guys. We'll put up a selection of the different types of shots, the memory aids, the record shots, the report shots, so you get an impression of the different sort of photographs we take and why. And as always, if you have any questions, just scribble them down and we'll do our best to answer them and discuss this a bit more in the interactive sessions. That's great. Thanks.